And we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Inside Sports Fantasy Football. The Lakers Fast Break, of course, Game Source, and of course, Pop Culture Cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, want to mention that you got to check out Dom-Ination Sports Nation. There's no better place to go for your instant hit of what's going on in the sports world to the Dom-Ination Sports Nation. Want to go ahead and check out everything that we do today at the Pop Culture Cosmos, Lakers Fast Break, but also as well, popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. And of course, for any inside sports football action, you want to go ahead and get your fantasy football fix, go ahead and check us out anytime at all, wherever you get your podcast, plus also as well on YouTube at the Pop Culture Cosmos. And if you have any questions, trades that have been coming your way, or trades that you might think you might be able to do, or starting lineup changes, waiver wire deals, things like that, go ahead and send it on over as far as your questions to us. isfantasyfootball at yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. Before we get into what's going on for today, I want to go ahead and mention that you need to check your lineups because it's another major bye week, week 10 in the NFL. So please go ahead and check it out because there are several major stars that are on the shelf for this week. So go ahead and check that out to make sure you make the right adjustments. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Well, week 10 in the NFL is now upon us. Looking forward to more great action. But do you still have a healthy quarterback that's standing upright? Or are you looking for a backup because of what I just said about the buys? Well, the list of fruitful quarterbacks is getting less and less, with one big surprise as a rookie that we'll also talk about as well. But here today to go ahead and talk about some of the options that you have a quarterback. Good man indeed. You got to go ahead and yes, that's what I was talking about. Yes, CJ Stroud. Absolutely. It is Chris Lardieri from the Dom-Ination Sports Nation. Chris, great to have you here. The quarterback position is looking slimmer and slimmer. Is it feast or famine right now for you or anyone else out there at quarterback?
Great to be back, Gerald. As you discovered the hard way this past week in our league, thanks to Jalen Hurts, Dom and I beat you, and I bet you were wishing you played us this week because I don't know who our starting quarterback's going to be. So the answer is famine
That's
for
just
week
my
10.
luck in fantasy football.
Yeah, so it is bad with Mahomes and Hurts out, just to name a couple. And then let's face it, just a general poor play at quarterback across the league as we've seen the past few weeks. Good luck. We stashed CJ Stroud in a league, in another league. I wish we had him in ours, and we didn't need to play him last week, although it would have been nice. But clearly, he's looking like not only a viable fantasy starter, but potentially offensive rookie of the year in the NFL.
And with the injury last week of Kirk Cousins, it really another profitable or fruitful quarterback has been taken out of the list, but it's getting to the point where Matthew Stafford from the Rams, he has been in and out with the injury bug, and it looks like he'll be having the chance to go ahead and maybe get some rest off the bye because he has a bye this week. But Carson Wentz, at that point, has been actually activated by the Rams. He's been signed to a contract. They got rid of Mark Rippon, but your thoughts, my friend, on Carson Wentz and if Carson Wentz can actually be and somebody viable that you might want to get as a pickup for a fantasy football team.
I don't think so. Judging by the way he played the past few years, and then on top of that, he's being thrown to the wolves. Doesn't really know the offense completely. Maybe down the road he might be all right, but I don't think we're going to see a repeat of Baker Mayfield last year when he showed up and played a Thursday night game and did well against the Raiders. Mayfield had been playing the whole year. Wentz has been sitting home, so I wouldn't do that. Guy, I'm kind of kicking myself that we didn't catch on to this a few weeks earlier. Kyler Murray's going to be reactivated, and not that the Cardinals are any offensive juggernaut, but The guy can throw, he can run, he can put up fantasy points. He plays for a bad team, and they'll be playing from behind. So I think he'd be more of a viable option than Wentz at this point.
So, with the limited options that are out there, I do see a list of names that maybe still be out there in your waiver wire. Or is it just time for everybody to just that have they have a quarterback issue to go ahead and try to make a trade? Because I know trades in fantasy leagues are really hard to go ahead and pull off. But your thoughts, my friend? There are still some names out there for the most part in some leagues, most leagues out there. Sam Howell from Washington, Joshua Dobbs, who's taken over the spot in Minnesota, Brock Purdy, depending on the league as well. Russell Wilson, everybody knows about the troubles for Denver, but he actually has had a statistically decent season. So your thoughts, my friend? I mean, the Derek Carrs, the Desmond Riddlers, the Mac Joneses of the world, they aren't really that appealing, but may be able to pull off a week or two where they could just really just have that one good week right when you need it.
Yeah, you basically just need to roll the dice, stream a quarterback for the week. And one guy you mentioned is Wilson. I know he's much maligned, but I think I'd rather have him than a Desmond Ritter at this point, for instance. I know
16-4 as far as touchdown interception
Yeah, and I
ratio.
mean, look, you can't if you've got like say a Tua or Hertz or Mahomes, don't expect that production from your backup quarterback, just like the real NFL. But if you can get decent points out of them, why not? I know Geno Smith's out there in one league I play in. We picked up Will
Yeah, how the
Levis.
mighty have fallen after
Yeah,
one year.
I
One year
know. I mean,
wonder.
yeah, it could be, but I mean, it depends on the matchup. If the Seahawks have a favorable matchup and your QB's on bye, give it a shot. We got Will Levis. I know he kind of struggled against the Steelers on Thursday night, but I like what I see. He's got a good arm. He had a really big game the week before when they beat the Falcons, I believe. So why not take a chance on him? I know there's a lot of rumblings that Tennessee hasn't named a starter yet this week, so keep an eye on that. But I mean, you even mentioned like a Sam Howell or Josh Dobbs. I mean, what Dobbs did was impressive. He didn't even know his teammates' names. He's working on the cadence with the center on the sideline before he's about to enter the game, and leads the Vikings to a victory. Dom and I saw him play in person. I'm not saying he's a great quarterback or he's the next Jeff Hostetler off the bench, but he's a serviceable quarterback. And if you need him in a pinch in fantasy, and it's between him and Desmond Ritter, I'd take Dobbs, no question.
There isn't much left after that, my friend. I mean, basically, you might have to look into making a trade if you really want somebody that, because of injuries, might get you by for the next 2, 3 weeks. If that's the case, what quarterbacks do you think are gettable right now in fantasy football? CJ Stroud, because he's on a hot streak, buy low, sell high,
I think if you're a Stroud owner, even if you've got him as your number two quarterback and are only using him as a bye week
which
fill in,
Ox
because
1947, aka Joe Soro, has had all
yeah, I
year.
mean, if you got a superstar ahead of him, you hold on to him and sell to the highest bidder. You're looking to get Stroud. This is the wrong week to bid on him because he had a phenomenal week, and one league I saw he had over 50 points. So if you've got him, great, and you need him for this week, then dangle him out there as trade bait and go back to your normal starter. But it's just hard because anyone who's got a decent backup quarterback at this point in the season might hold on as insurance because you never know. I mean, we have Hurts. He's been banged up all year. You hear all these things. He's questionable. He appears on the injury report. I think he's just one hard hit away from potentially being hurt like he was last year. Now, he didn't miss a lot of time, but if you need him in the fantasy playoffs last year, he could have cost you a game. So hard to say. But at this point, if you're desperate, start streaming quarterbacks and maybe you get lightning in a bottle and you get a starter out of it. You find the next Geno Smith or Brock Purdy, for instance.
Joe Soro, aka Ox 1947, has said that he's been using Tua in the starting lineup like I have, but has been finding increasingly less effective results. In fact, this past weekend in Germany, just rather average numbers at best. Hopefully, Tua will have, I guess, a turnaround once he comes off the bye week. But then that's all dependent. I think that Miami is a team that feasts on really inferior teams, but anytime they have a team that's right around or above their skill level, I think it really they just don't show up for in many of these games.
Yeah, definitely, and especially if you play a team that's got a defense that knows how to neutralize Tyreek Hill, I feel like as he goes, the Dolphins' offense goes. So the Chiefs clearly knew how to game plan him. Big turnover, they punched the ball out and returned it for a touchdown. So we saw earlier in the season when the Bills' defense was still intact, they completely worked Tua and the Dolphins' offense. So the good news is, I think they'll have periods of their schedule as we're headed into the second half here. We'll have some favorable matchups. So you pretty much have to hold on to Tua unless, let's say, you're like Joe and you've got a Stroud. Maybe you consider trading him while he's still got some value. And then too, like, hate to be devil's advocate here, risk management, whatever you want to call it, but Tua is always one concussion away from having his season end.
This is true. Absolutely true indeed. That's the risk you take with Tua. That's for sure. Alex Flores says, "Who wins the trade? Adams and Amari Cooper, or Bijan and Garrett Wilson?" Joe Soro in the chat already mentioned that Adams and Amari Cooper would be his choices. I have both. As far as on my team, I would tell you that that's probably the best case scenario for you right there. I would say that probably ekes out the win for me. Your thoughts on who wins the trade between those two sets of dynamic duos?
So the second one was getting Bijan and Garrett Wilson, you said?
Yeah,
I might lean towards that because those guys are so beaten down right now. Maybe you're getting some value there. If Arthur Smith would get his head out of his posterior and start giving Bijan touches like he did the first 4 weeks of the season, maybe you've got yourself a steal there. But that's asking a lot of Arthur Smith. So I'll just say that to be a contrarian. And now there's this rumor that Rodgers might return before the end of the season. I think it's just that, a rumor. But at some point, Zach Wilson's got to wake up and get the ball to Garrett like he did last year.
we've talked about this season about the dynamic offense that looks for the most part has returned. Sans a really, really great receiver in Kansas City. We talked about what Miami has done with their dynamic offense earlier in the season. We've talked about the particulars about many NFL teams, but the one team that really has gone under the radar, but now is making a lot of noise, the Baltimore Ravens, my friend, who have now regained their je ne sais quoi, so to speak, and basically now have once again become a big time powerhouse in the AFC. Your thoughts as far as riding a wave of Ravens going forward in fantasy football?
Yeah, I know Lamar really didn't do a heck of a lot fantasy wise this past weekend, but I don't know what it is with the Ravens between their defense and the revolving door of running backs. Gus Edwards from my alma mater, Rutgers, for instance. I just think this team knows how to win. And, Lamar has a crappy game and they still work the Seahawks. They just completely pounded the ball away and kept the Seahawks defense on the field for most of that game. So, um, from a fantasy perspective, I think you continue to play them because right now they're the front runners in the AFC North. They've already beaten the Bengals once. They're going to have a key matchup coming up here later in the year. They've got a key one this coming Sunday against the Cleveland Browns and their stout defense, which is interesting. But whether Lamar puts up the numbers or not, I think John Harbaugh has really got a winning formula for this team, and they're doing it the old school way with the running and defense right now. But me personally, I think Lamar wakes up at some point, and he's gonna give you some points if you own him.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is Chris Lardieri from the Dom-Ination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Joe Soro says Mark Andrews has been the most valuable offensive player on the Ravens, but that's about it. So they asked as far as that seems to be status quo for Mark Andrews. I mean, he's just been solid each year in and out. Seems like it's just like clockwork for him. Just something as an aside, whoever's throwing him the ball, just seemingly he gets his share of touches in his productivity. So Oxide T47 says, yeah, everyone else could do well or have a dud. So I think right now the Baltimore Ravens have been playing more as a team effort on both sides of the ball. They've been getting it done, but they haven't needed a dynamic offense in order to go ahead and win a whole bunch of games this season.
Yeah, definitely. And as an Andrews owner, I'm gotta agree with Joe. Completely happy with his performance. That's the one guy through out the past few seasons. Lamar likes to target, and that hasn't changed this year. But yeah, I think from a purely NFL fan watching the team, it's impressive. But with fantasy, you've got that hit or miss factor where you don't know if they're just going to do the ball control, if Lamar is going to have an epic game like he did a few seasons ago. You just don't know. But at least they're enjoyable to watch in terms of the way they're playing football right now. But remains to be seen. Again, if you're looking for a fantasy quarterback and you got Lamar, I don't think I'd necessarily sell him at this point because at some point, he's going to take over a game and win it.
Before we head on out, my friend, for fantasy football owners out there, week 10 in the NFL, is there any certain games that you're looking at as far as kind of matchups that you think should be advantageous for fantasy football owners out there? I'm seeing the Chargers and the Lions. The Chargers coming off a very strong victory, and the Lions, who've proven to be, for the most part, one of the better teams in the NFC. I'm seeing this as a good offensive matchup. Both teams getting in the 20s, if not maybe one sneaking into the 30s as far as points are concerned. Your thoughts on a good fantasy football matchup in week 10?
Yeah, you read my mind. Completely agree with you on that game. Another game that's of interest to me is Jacksonville and the 49ers. I think it's an excellent matchup on paper, but this could be a statement game for the Jaguars. We know they went into Pittsburgh a few weeks back and won, but now the 49ers, who are not quite the 49ers we thought they were when they were completely trouncing the Cowboys on Sunday night about a month ago. Well, which team's going to show up? They have Chase Young now, so I think it'll be interesting. Brock Purdy's got to make a statement to see if he can get this offense back under control. We know McCaffrey's there. They definitely miss Debo, but I think this could be an interesting game. I think we talked about him last week, unsung heroes of fantasy so far. I've got him. I'm thrilled to have him. Travis Etienne. I think he's going to definitely have to make a difference if the Jaguars are going to win. And then two, from a purely selfish perspective, my New York Giants are a complete and utter hot mess. If you own anyone on the Dallas Cowboys, play him. The Giants are completely in disarray. They've got Tommy DeVito at quarterback, which is basically like punting every offensive series for them. So the Cowboys are going to have the ball a lot this coming Sunday, and they also are 16.5 point favorites, if you haven't noticed.
Before we head on out, it's time to go ahead and head out on the lawn, take a look around, see if everything's good, getting the last nice breath of decent weather, mid 70s, depending on where you're at. In fact, here in Vegas, it reached 90 earlier this week. So going out before the weather gets cold because of the time change and all that, and woof, 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 checking out what's going on in the doghouse.
Well, last week's doghouse pick was utter crap, pardon the pun, but the Jets clearly did not show up last night, namely Zach Wilson. The Chargers completely worked the Jets. I thought the whole home dog thing would come into play, but Jets frankly didn't show up. I think the only one who showed up was Aaron Rodgers to show that he's off crutches, but I digress. Some of the, as I've been complaining about all year, Gerald, Vegas just loves these like 6.5, 1.5 point lines. They just don't want to give in. Really, one game that kind of stuck out to me, but I don't think I have the guts to do it, is the Bengals are giving 6.5 to the aforementioned Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. But with the way the Bengals are playing right now, I just think that's too dangerous. I think you'd need more than 6.5 to justify taking the Texans there. But I'll stick with my home dog theory. The Jacksonville Jaguars are getting 3 points against the 49ers. If it does move up to 3.5, jump all over that. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars win this game outright, but I could see it being a close, hard fought game. I think Trevor Lawrence is really developing nicely. And while I know the 49ers have brutal bookend D lineman and Bosa, now Chase Young, I do like the way Doug Peterson knows how to game plan. So I think they'll do their best to neutralize them and hope the Jaguars pull out a close one. Jags are the doghouse pick this week.
So not the Giants at 16 and a half as far as the underdogs this week. As Joe Soros says, Tommy DeVito plays quarterback for the Giants, and who knew he could be that funny?
Funny how. So, a little bit of trivia here. Tommy DeVito's dad and grandfather lived around the corner from me from where I grew up in New Jersey. Remember watching him play in college, and then dawned upon me during that brutal game against the Jets, like, that's the kid of my old neighbors. So, good for him. Pride of Bloomfield, New Jersey. But no, I think if maybe the Giants were, you look at one of these college mismatch games, and maybe the Giants were getting like 28 and a half points, I'd take them, but I still think the Cowboys could easily beat them by 17 to 21. They're that bad.
I will say my pick is the Commanders, who are a 6 point underdog at home against the Seahawks. Seahawks coming off a not too pleasant loss that they just suffered. So, or actually a beatdown, I should say. And we talked about Geno Smith, not Geno Smith of 2022. So I'm saying that those factors might come into play. Plus, Sam Howell, you know, even though he's still on the waiver wire for a lot of teams out there, a quarterback, not doing too bad. Has some options, but then again, is he the quarterback of the future? I think the next 6 or 7 games are going to tell you whether or not he will be the quarterback for the Commanders going forward.
Yeah, Howell definitely shows some nice flashes. His
He,
problem, he's been sacked over like 40 something times this year, and
yeah,
I
and
don't
it's
care
just
who his
it's just
quarterback is.
hard to go ahead. That's why he's still on the waiver wire, despite some decent games and decent stats at times.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Part of me almost wonders: are you better off with a Heineke in Atlanta if he continues to start? I mean, this is slim pickings here, but Howell is just basically running for his life most games, and it's not an indictment on him.
Before we head on out, my friend, what's going on at the Dom-Ination Sports Nation?
Thank you, Gerald. As always, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. It's Dom-Ination Sports Nation. Follow us on Instagram at Dom-Ination Sports Nation. You can follow me on, I refuse to call it X, Twitter at Chris L Sports. We'll be talking about is the NFL really filled with mediocre teams? Dom turned to me this past Sunday and said, there are a lot of bad teams in the NFL this year. And I know there's some really good ones, but some of these games, especially in the early 10 o'clock window on the West Coast, are just brutal and unwatchable at times. So, we'll talk about that. Topic near and dear to your heart, the NBA with their in season tournament going on. I can't figure it out. Dom tried to explain it to me. One of his friends likened it to what goes on in European soccer. And I still can't figure it out. So I just realized that the tournament started. So I think the
Yeah.
other thing we'll be focusing
Whoop
on
de
is
doo is what I say. Whoop de doo.
yeah. If you ask me, Gerald, I don't know if you were there last night, but college basketball started in your backyard.
Yep.
USC played in T-Mobile, so I mean, I know the NCAA regular season's a little bit marginalized now, but at this point, it's something else to watch. It's an alternative. So,
We'll see.
uh,
Isaiah Collier, who's expected to be one of the top 5 picks in the NBA draft, playing for USC. But the best news for USC is that Bronny James gave an update, and he's going to have a consultation with a doctor later on this month, and another examination. And if all goes well, he could be playing for the USC Trojans by the end of this year, calendar year per se. So,
Yeah, that
all
that'd
good news.
definitely be interesting. I mean, that's a great story if he can do it, but his health is first and foremost, right? So
Absolutely.
we shall see. But it's a great story. It'll definitely garner a lot of media attention if he pulls it off. So hoping for the best for Bronny. And then too, with the end of baseball season, something which I seem to find more interesting than some of these actual games itself, the Hot Stove League. And the big question will be, where will Shohei Ohtani end up? I tend to think not with the Angels, but
Not
we'll
with
have a
the
lot of
Angels.
suitors.
Probably looking good in Dodger blue, but we'll find
Yeah.
out indeed. They can throw out the most cash. I'm pretty sure that them or the Yankees will be the ones, but be my choices.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the Yankees will get in on it. They're another mismanaged organization, but there's dark horses looming out there like the Giants and the Mariners. So I know he wants to stay on the West Coast. I got to think they're in play too.
Dodger blue, man, Dodger blue. They'll throw out the cash and see what they're gonna do. But once again, it is Chris Lardieri. He and Dom Lardieri got to go ahead and check out what they're doing at Domination Sports Nation today, wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Chris, congratulations on your victory over me this past weekend. Hoping I can get back on the right track and hoping everyone out there gets on the right track Hoping you will have an injury-free, although I doubt that will happen, NFL Week 10. But looking forward to some great news and great things. Again, if you have any questions for us, always isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com or Inside Sports FF on Twitter. So for Chris Lardieri from the Dom-Ination Sports Nation, it's Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much for watching this thing. We'll see you next time. Good luck to your team this weekend, and we'll see you on the Inside Sports Fantasy Football.